In 2026, the world finally ran the Hormuz stress test. Saudi Arabia pushed more oil across the desert to the Red Sea. The United Arab Emirates relied on a pipeline to Fujairah, outside the strait. Emergency reserves were released. Buyers searched for replacement cargoes. The bypasses worked, and they still were not enough. Oil flows collapsed. Gulf producers cut output. Asian markets felt the pressure first, and the International Energy Agency coordinated the largest emergency oil stock release in its history, 400 million barrels. So this is not another story about why Hormuz matters. The real question is, after decades of preparation, why can the world still not bypass it? Because Hormuz is not just a narrow passage. It is the exit point for an entire energy system. Oil fields feed processing plants. Processing plants feed pipelines. Pipelines feed storage and export terminals. Specialized tankers carry specific crude grades to specific refineries. Contracts, port capacity, and political relationships hold everything together. In 2025, about 20 million barrels per day of crude oil and petroleum products pass through Hormuz, around 1/4 of global seaborne oil trade. Alternative routes exist, but none can replace Hormuz at scale. Saudi Arabia has the Gulf's most powerful alternative. The east-west pipeline runs from Abqaiq, near the Persian Gulf, across the Arabian Peninsula to Yanbu on the Red Sea. The system was designed for about 5 million barrels per day. Saudi Aramco later reported capacity of up to 7 million, but maximum capacity is not dependable export capacity. Before the 2026 conflict, Saudi oil exports from Yanbu were about 2 million barrels per day under the IEA's broader export measure. By early June, they had risen above 5 million. That was an extraordinary response, and close to the system's practical export ceiling. Roughly 2 million barrels per day are needed by refineries and other facilities on Saudi Arabia's western coast. That leaves about 5 million for export, and every link must work at once. The pipeline, storage, loading berths, and enough tankers in the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia is considering an expansion of up to 2 million barrels per day, but the talks are preliminary. A larger system would cost billions, take years, and may also serve neighboring exporters. And after the oil reaches Yanbu, geography has not disappeared. Cargoes toward Europe remain linked to Suez. Cargoes toward Asia must pass through the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb. The pipeline does not eliminate choke point risk. It moves the risk. The United Arab Emirates built the Gulf's other major bypass. The Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline runs roughly 400 kilometers from Habshan to Fujairah, outside Hormuz. Its reported capacity is close to 1.8 million barrels per day. Before the disruption, the UAE was already exporting about 1.1 million barrels per day through this route. That left room for only about 700,000 additional barrels. The pipeline gave the UAE flexibility, but served only a fraction of the Gulf's exports. And Fujairah was not outside the conflict zone. Attacks in 2026 disrupted operations at the port, proving that bypassing the strait does not make the terminal invulnerable. Together, the Saudi and Emirati systems provide an estimated 3.5 million to 5.5 million barrels per day of available bypass capacity. Hormuz handled about 20 million. The bypasses are shock absorbers. They are not substitutes. Then comes the harder problem, liquefied natural gas. Qatar cools natural gas into LNG inside the Persian Gulf, then ships it through Hormuz on specialized carriers. In 2025, more than 110 billion cubic meters of LNG crossed the strait, almost 1/5 of global LNG trade, about 93% of Qatar's LNG exports, and 96% of the UAE's use this route. There is no operational seaborne bypass for those volumes. An oil pipeline cannot carry LNG. Qatar would need cross-border gas pipelines, plus new liquefaction plants and export terminals outside the Gulf. That is not just an engineering project. It is a geopolitical agreement. A route through Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or Oman would make Qatar dependent on another government for access to global customers. The engineering solution would create a political dependency. One vulnerability could replace another. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the exceptions. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, and Iran rely on Hormuz for the vast majority of their oil exports. Iraq has northern routes through Turkey and has used limited outlets through Syria. But these corridors remain much smaller than Iraq's southern Gulf export system and cannot yet replace it at scale. Recent agreements are aimed at developing or reviving alternatives, which confirms that a sufficient bypass does not currently exist. Iran built the Gorgas pipeline toward the Gulf of Oman. Its reported capacity is 1 million barrels per day, but after a test shipment in late 2024, the route remained effectively non-operational. The IEA does not consider it a viable large-scale export option. This reveals the weakness in the phrase. Just build another pipeline. Pipelines cross territory. Territory requires agreements. Agreements create dependencies. Those relationships must survive sanctions, wars, disputes, and changes of government. The obstacle is not only distance, it is trust. Imagine every proposed alternative is completed. More Saudi oil reaches Yanbu. Kuwaiti exports connect to Saudi infrastructure. Qatari gas reaches a terminal outside the Gulf. Dependence on Hormuz would fall, but new concentrations would emerge around pipelines and ports. Yanbu would send more traffic through the Red Sea. Fujairah would become even more strategically important. Cross-border routes would depend on neighboring governments. Tankers would still face Suez, Bab el-Mandeb, or other crowded corridors. In fact, recent diversions through Yanbu have already increased the strategic importance of the Red Sea route for Asian refiners. The world would not abolish choke point risk. It would redistribute it. True redundancy requires multiple routes, spare capacity, protected terminals, compatible crude grades, available tankers, and rapid switching. That is expensive infrastructure to maintain when Hormuz remains the shortest and most efficient route. When Hormuz traffic collapsed, the response became global. IEA members released emergency reserves. Saudi Arabia drew on oil stored overseas. The UAE used pipelines and storage near Fujairah. Producers elsewhere sent more crude toward Asian buyers. These actions softened the shock, but emergency reserves are temporary. Replacement cargoes travel farther, cost more, and may not match refinery requirements. The world can adapt around a disruption. That is not the same as replacing the system. Asia remains the most exposed region. About 80% of the oil and petroleum products passing through Hormuz in 2025 went to Asian markets. For LNG, the share was almost 90%. China, India, Japan, and South Korea are not watching a distant shipping dispute. Hormuz is embedded in their domestic energy systems. So why can the world still not bypass Hormuz? Because pipelines can bypass geography. They cannot recreate an entire trading system. The alternatives are smaller. Some are already heavily used. LNG cannot use the oil pipelines, and every new route introduces another port, border, or political dependency. The energy system surrounding Hormuz was built for efficiency, not complete redundancy. The 2026 disruption proved both sides of the argument. The bypasses mattered. Emergency reserves bought time. New suppliers softened the shortage, but only the recovery of regular shipping through Hormuz restored flows at meaningful scale. In June, total Gulf oil exports, including bypass routes, rebounded to 16.1 million barrels per day. That was still below the pre-war average of 24 million. Renewed fighting in July then showed how quickly that progress could be threatened. By July 16th, Hormuz commodity vessel transits had again fallen to their lowest daily level since May, while renewed conflict also raised the risk of disruption around the Red Sea. Hormuz is not irreplaceable because no road exists around it. It is irreplaceable because every route around it is smaller, slower, more expensive, politically dependent, or exposed to another choke point. That is the deeper power of strategic geography. It does not simply decide where ships travel. It decides which alternatives are possible. Subscribe to Geonomics, where geopolitics meets economics.